This is a podcast from Seven Vineyard.
Okay, good morning. My name is Joanna. I have been at Seven about 7.5 years now, which is crazy, since I moved to Bristol, which feels like a very, very long time. I work at Bristol University as a research scientist, which is why I moved to Bristol in the first place. And I'm married to Aidan. So actually, just before I start, I want to say as well, during the worship and through what Dan was saying, I also kind of felt a sense of, in circus worlds, when they do like a trapeze or something, they always have a safety net beneath them. And kind of a sense of God saying to me, at least, that he is that safety net, that if you want to step out, whether that's to step out in faith, to do something, or whether that's just a stepping out with, God, I have this really difficult thing, and I don't know if I can trust you with it, or I don't know who to trust with it. That sense of him saying, like, you can trust me, that he is utterly trustworthy, and that he is that safety net beneath, that it can feel sometimes like we're falling, but actually he's saying, no, I'm going to catch you. So whether that's relevant to what I'm going to say or not at all, whether actually what Dan or Joel said this morning is actually really captured your heart, then I just pray that you can kind of take that as an encouragement to say that you can trust God. He is your safety net, and whether it's you stepping out or whether it's you feel like you're just falling, that he is here to catch you. So before I start, I had a little joke as relevant to talk, hopefully. So Jesus once said to a top theologian, "Who do you say that I am?" And they replied, "You are the eschatological manifestation of the ground of being, the proclamation of which we find ultimate meaning in our interpersonal relationships." To which Jesus replied, "What?" "Oh, good, you don't understand it either," replied the theologian. Today, I kind of wanted to speak on that very same question, that Jesus didn't ask a top theologian, but he did ask his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" When Owen and Claire asked me to speak for today, I did struggle for a while to work out what to speak on, partly because I wasn't given a particular topic or like theme, which I actually really hate. I'd much rather be given a topic, because then there's far less stress, because, then if you don't like what you've been given, it's tough. You just have to do it. Whereas with this, you have to pick and then stress, have I picked the right thing? So, of course, part of it is, Claire and Owen said, you just got to speak on whatever God is saying to you, whatever he's put in your heart, speak on that instead. So, of course, that's where I had to start. What has God been saying to me? What do I feel like he wants to say to us? And so what I've been reflecting on and thinking about recently is about formation. That is, who am I becoming and what is my life pointing towards? I've also been thinking about God's kingdom. That is, how do I see his will, his word, his work coming into my life, into the city? And how can I step into that in like the everyday? And then also, what is my mission? What is my calling? There's whatever word you want to insert there. And maybe it sounds big and grand. I really don't mean it to. Instead, I'm just trying to express this question that I have and that maybe you have as well, which is, what am I doing with my life now and for the future with God? And so I kept coming back to this question from Jesus, where he says to his disciples, "Who do you say I am?" And I think I've been coming back to this question because I don't think it's just a simple question of identification. Either like, oh yeah, you're Jesus, or as in the joke, oh, you're what all these other commentaries or people say. I think Jesus was actually asking a much deeper question to his disciples and to us now. One that has implications for us and our relationship with God, but also beyond us for our world too. Because I think that how we honestly answer that question not only defines how we view God, but how we come to define who we are and how we choose to live and impact, how we choose to live and the impact we make in our world and in God's kingdom. And when I say this, to me, God's kingdom is just where more of his rule and his will come here in our world. It is like the Lord's Prayer, where we say, on earth as it is in heaven. It is God's kingdom. God's kingdom is coming wherever there is his love, his justice, his mercy, and his grace, and where they infect and infiltrate our world, to the extent that that place becomes more heaven-like than before. That is what I think God's kingdom is, and when I refer to it, that's what I'm meaning. And what's amazing in all of this is that even though God could just do that on his own, that actually he wants to partner with us in that he wants to make us a part in bringing his rule and his heaven into our world. And so this question, who do you say I am? And all of its implications are what I want to try and explore through this passage today. And I'm conscious that I think I've gone too broad with it. So I've tried my best to minimize my thoughts and to keep it, shorter. But my hope is that from what I say that we can be challenged and inspired, that this can be something we think about, but also that moves us to action, that also moves us to step out into our worlds and to see, okay, where can I bring more of God in my world? Maybe in a big way, or maybe just in a really small way in our everyday. So the passage, the question where this passage is found is in Matthew 16. If you have a Bible or a phone app with you, it's Matthew 16, verses 13 to 23. And I'm going to ask my dad to read it out for us.
Good morning. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am, the Son of Man is?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you?" He asked, "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was a Messiah.
Perfect. Thank you, Dad. So there is a lot there, and there's more that I'm going to speak on. I think there is really deep richness in that passage, and I really had to limit myself to be like, I can't talk about everything. So I would recommend going away and thinking about these passages more and looking into them. I think there could be a whole series on bits within this talk. But this morning, we're going to focus on that question. So firstly, a little context for where this story comes in the wider gospel story. So chapter 16 in Matthew marks a major turning point in Jesus' life and his ministry. See, in the build-up to chapter 16, Matthew, in his book, he's focused on answering this question, well, who is Jesus? And so he starts to try and build up the character of Jesus to his readers, starting literally with the genealogy, like Jesus' origins. This is where he comes from, his childhood, the start of his ministry, his miracles, and his teachings. But chapter 16 marks the first time that Jesus actually says or reveals that he is the Messiah and that he's come to die. And then once this is out, Jesus' journey takes a decisive turn for Jerusalem, where he goes to be crucified. So now that once he proclaims who he is, then he starts preparing to do what he came to do. And so this passage starts with Jesus asking an easy question to his disciples. Who do people say the Son of Man is? And Son of Man was just kind of like his nickname for himself. It's in the Old Testament too, but it's kind of just his moniker for himself. Who do other people say the Son of Man is? And this is an easier question because actually the disciples just have to say what other people think. They don't have to say what they think. They just have to say what other people around them have been saying. And in fact, I think anyone, regardless of your faith, can answer that question. Who do people say Jesus is? And the disciples respond that people say that they think he's John the Baptist, Elijah, Jeremiah, another prophet. So it's clear that the crowds, they're not wildly off with their guesses. They've actually seen something in Jesus that marks him out as different from all the other teachers and rabbis. That they may not be following him, but they're still seeing something different in him, different to other people. But they're not quite right. So then Jesus asks his disciples the harder question, the more important question, who do you say that I am? And in answer to Jesus' question, Simon states, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." He gets it. He says it out. He says, "I've seen it. You are the Messiah." And although he does say this, it's clear that he doesn't necessarily understand every part of what he's saying. And we can see this from the following verses, where Jesus tells his disciples he must go to Jerusalem to be killed and to rise. And Simon takes Jesus aside to rebuke him, which seems like a pretty bold move. He's gone from saying, "Jesus, I think you're the Messiah," to, "Actually, I need to tell you off because what I think you're doing is wrong." And I guess I guess why I wanted to bring that out was just to say that it's clear that Simon doesn't quite get all of what he's saying. He proclaims that Jesus is the Messiah, but he misses it slightly because he doesn't want Jesus to die. But does it matter that he doesn't truly understand who Jesus is or what he came to do? Does it matter that he doesn't quite get it right himself? I think it actually matters more that he steps out and says it, that he takes a step of faith and he says, this is who I think you are. That he has been paying attention enough to have seen something in Jesus and to step forward in faith with an answer. I think that is what matters, not that he understands it fully, but that he's willing to step out and say, I think this is who you are. And there is power in his proclamation. As we will see, as my dad read, the verse carries on, after his proclamation, Jesus replies to Simon, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Quick side note, does anyone know what the name Simon means? Like in Hebrew, what the name means? Huh? Reed. No, not read. His name means he hears. So there's like clever wordplay going on here with the names that Jesus is using. So obviously his name is Simon. So here Jesus is basically saying, blessed are you, he who hears, or Simon. For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father. He's basically saying, you who have heard, you who hear what my Father has said to you, I now rename you, I call you Peter. Does anyone know what Peter means? Rock, exactly. So he's saying, you who have heard, I now rename you when I call you Peter, I call you Rock. And of course he goes on to say, and you are the rock that I will build my church on. In Simon Peter, proclaiming who Jesus is, Simon is renamed to Peter and repurposed to be the rock of the church, the rock the church is built on. A transformation happens to him. As he identifies Jesus, Jesus identifies him back. And if you've read the rest of the Gospels or the book of Acts, which Owen has been going through, you'll know that Peter becomes one of the core apostles who, alongside Paul, would lead and build up the early Christians and the early Christian church. He becomes foundational to its development, its progression, and its dissemination across the Middle East and beyond, in proclaiming Jesus' message and trying to follow it as best he could, and to lead other people in that. See, in asking this question to his disciples, Jesus isn't just asking them what they think about him. He's asking them, why are you following me? Why have you left everything you know? Who do you say that I am that you would do all of this? And questions of identity are at the heart of the Gospels. It's why Matthew starts his Gospel with a genealogy of Jesus' ancestors. Through narrative storytelling, each Gospel story depicts a range of portraits about the character and nature of Jesus. But in weaving these accounts and stories of Jesus together, the Gospel writers weren't just interested in saying this is who Jesus is, but also how his identity, who he is, should change those who come to follow him. These writings aren't just here to tell us about Jesus, but how then we as individuals, but also as a community, should be shaped by those teaching, his actions, and his identity as his son, as God's son. So Jesus' question isn't just about identity, but also about formation. That when we identify him, he identifies us, and that changes us. In saying who Jesus really is, in saying, this is who you are to me, we are changed. Or rather, it is that we start to allow God to change us gradually. And I've struggled with how to phrase this, because I realize that saying, oh yeah, just say who Jesus is and he changes you, wow, that's great. It sounds really easy, it sounds flippant, it sounds like, oh, you're transformed, wonderful. And I think it is a little bit like that, and I think it's not at the same time. I don't think it's a magical fairy tale transformation, like a spell or a word being said, and then suddenly everything falls into place. But I do think that when we take Jesus seriously, when we take his teaching seriously, that he does change us, and that it is his heart to change us, it is his desire to change us. And he changes us through the Spirit working in us. It's through the Spirit working in us that we are transformed to love. We are transformed to love. And that change is a slow, deliberate turning of our heart posture towards God, towards God's way instead of our own way, towards other rather than ourselves, towards love rather than selfishness. And that may sound slightly different from saying you're transformed or identified, but I think that is God's core purpose in our lives, is to transform us to love. And you probably heard it said that We only have one word for love in our language, which is incomplete. I can say that I love ice cream, but also I can love my husband, and they're very different types of love. I think sometimes because we only have that one word and we overuse it, we forget how transformative God's love actually is, how powerful it is. So when I say that we are changed, I think we are transformed in love to get away from ourselves and closer to God, away from ourselves and closer to others. And in that, we can kind of find our purpose and find what we are to do. Just as Peter was called to be the rock, he had to sacrifice a lot to do that. We are transformed by love to step out, to forget ourselves and to love others better. And in that, we are drawn closer to God and we become more like him. And so my first reflection or challenge that I want to pose to you is, who do you say Jesus is? Maybe after this service or later today or this week, you can try and answer that question for yourself. Who do you say he is? But then ask God to answer that same question over you. Who does God say you are? How does he identify you? And to wait for an answer. I believe that God does and wants to speak to us. But we need time and space and quiet to hear his response. Now, just as Peter is called the rock, the rock on which the church was built, Peter, in one of his later letters, calls us, as disciples of Jesus, living stones. In 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 4-5, Peter says, "As you come to him, the living stone," that's Jesus, "rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to God, you also," talking about us, "you also are like living stones, being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood." See, we are also named by God. We all have a purpose and a place. And we are called to have a role in his kingdom and in his church, both of which are centered around relationship with God, with family, friends, community, but also around our work. And by that, I don't just mean our paid work necessarily, just what we do and how that contributes to God's kingdom. See, we are each called to be a stone in the brickwork. We're not going to be the whole structure, thankfully, but we are necessary for the building to stand. And so my second thought or challenge that I want for you is, what do you think you're called to do in the kingdom? Just as with Peter, I think God also wants to call us into things. That he wants to call each of us into service, into works, into action. What do you think you are called to do in the kingdom? I realize that's quite a big question. I'm not expecting you to have a really simple answer straight away. And for Peter, he had a really clear one from Jesus. Jesus said, "You are the rock which the church is built on." Great, he went out and did it. For the rest of us, our call might be as big as that. It might be stepping out for a church, a charity, an organization, a mission. Or it could just be a small thing that happens for a bit of time and then it changes into something else. I think both are entirely and completely valid. And so as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, it's great to say all these things, but where does that leave us? I guess I want to say, I want us to be inspired by start thinking, well, what can I step out into? And so I started thinking about, well, what have I been inspired by? Where have I seen other people step out in faith and bring more of God's kingdom here? Where have I seen them step out into their calling? And how has that inspired me? So that's kind of what I want to share for the rest of this, and I hope that it can be really helpful and practical and applicational, if that's a word, to help us as we start to think, okay, where do I think God is calling me out into? And it might look different to what you're thinking. I don't mean it doesn't need to be really ultra-Christian is what I'm trying to say. And hopefully we'll see that. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of 40 Acts. No? It's a Lent resource run by Stewardship, which is a Christian charity that helps give money to different Christian charities. So every day, they've been running this for years, you can get emailed a reflection and a challenge, and it's written by different people, and they focus on different charities. And kind of the main themes are generosity around doing small acts each day during Lent to try and share God's love, and also to grow as well. So one of them I read 2 weeks ago that I found really helpful. It was about a group in Canada that helped protect and conserve habitats for wild salmon. And the reflection read, so this was from, this is what the reflection said. Cindy Verbeck, who spearheads the Salmon Project for A Rocha, says, "It is not my job to save the world. That's already been done. Instead, she sees her job as to walk alongside the creator of the world, to do my part in the redemption of this world, and to love what he loves. And in British Columbia, for me, that means caring for salmon. It's maybe not where I thought that was going to end. See, in British Columbia, in Canada, this group that work with A. rocha, they love and care for the salmon population in that area. They do all that they can to preserve it, to look after the habitat and the environment around them, and to support these salmon. And in doing so, they are stewarding and loving God's creation well. And they are sustaining a beautiful ecosystem that he has created. And what I learned from this reflection is one fun fact. Did you know that, so lots of salmon pass through there, and when there's a bumpy year of salmon, even the trees benefit from it, as in they grow bigger that year, because of like the nutrients. I don't know why, actually. And you can see by the rings in the tree, so they can go back and date and be like, oh yeah, that was a bumpy year of salmon because the tree grew much more than previous years. Just saying, kind of like in that area, the whole ecosystem benefits from just this one species. In their love for ecology and for salmon, this group are trying to restore and preserve part of God's kingdom, a part that he loves too. Our part in the kingdom doesn't have to be big or grand. It doesn't have to look ultra-Christian. I think most of us know this already, but I love what Cindy said, that she just said, it's just our job to walk alongside the creator of the world, to do our part, to step out, to have action, and to love what he loves. For Cindy, she loves the environment, she loves salmon, and she loves how that area has benefited from it. And that's what she steps out to do. What do you love? And could what you love be something that God is nudging you towards? Something where you can see more of God coming alive in that place. So as I was considering this question myself, what do I love? Who do I see also stepping out into the kingdom? How do I feel inspired by that? I'm going to mention a few people that I've seen that I feel challenged and inspired by, who I think are already leaning into this, who've helped me think, how do I answer that question of what do I love? What is my role in the kingdom? And these are just people that I know. They're not, really big Christians or big famous names. They're just people who I do everyday life with. So I wanted to share some examples so that they can inspire us as well. The first one is a friend called Ailey, that she used to live with my husband in a community house. And she's becoming a foster carer. So we visited her. She's moved to Llandudno in Wales recently. And we saw how she is changing her home to make it suitable for children to be able to live there. And she's gone through that foster care process application, and she's been approved. And that means that she can have children into her house where she can look after them and love them. I mean, just in seeing that, how she's changing her home, as she's prioritizing that, and that she's choosing to say, these children who are vulnerable, I want to bring them in, and I want to create a home where they can be supported and loved, and I can say positive affirmation over them. And I know there's a few others in Seven as well doing the same. I was also reminded recently, we go to another church called CrossNet in the evening. There was a couple who used to go there who now who live in Newport, and they asked us to pray on their WhatsApp group recently for a boy who'd been stabbed by his brother. The parents of the brothers are AWOL. The family is affected by drug addiction. But this young boy, has been coming along to this couple's youth stuff that they've been running. He's not necessarily a Christian, but he's been coming along every week. So in their message, they were just asking for prayer for him as he was in hospital. And they called him one of their boys. And after I read this, I just imagined that couple going into hospital to visit this boy. They're surrounding him with this love and care, and they're weeping for him. And he's not their son, but he calls them one of their boys. Through caring for these familyless children, these people are helping to bring redemption in a small part of the world they live in. They're not doing something big by maybe the world standards, but they're expanding their lives to include these children, and they're enacting God's love and justice. They are bringing forth God's kingdom. I also thought of my mum, because it is Mother's Day, but no, I also thought of her as well. So she runs a food bank in Starbridge, where she lives and where I grew up. That food bank was started 16 years ago, and my mum has been there since the beginning. I used to go along with her to help in school holidays. It's actually one of my favorite places to go because, food bank is a wonderful place, full of amazing people. And the number of people that have said to my mum, she now runs that food bank, the number of people that said to her, I wouldn't still be here if it wasn't for you and this service. And I've seen it for myself, the transformation that happens when people come in and they're hopeless. They're at the bottom of their hole. They feel despair and they don't know what to do. And when they are met with, well, firstly with food, provision, physical stuff, but they're met with support, love, no judgment. They're told, this is a safe place that you can come. Even if you don't need food, just come and we can chat with you. They are given hope in what they see as a hopeless situation. See, through caring for those who need help and by seeking the good of others, we again are bringing God's kingdom in. I've also been challenged by someone in this very church, by Karen Green. I know that she's been on a journey over the last year and a half where she's been really trying to seek God's will. And I've seen this when she's brought it up in our small group, when she's part of it, or just being around her house, where she's praying to be filled with the Holy Spirit and trying to step out to say, I want to do what he tells me to do. And then she's wanting to bring people into that as well. This is a journey that she's on, but she wants to bring kind of a community into that to say that's what she wants for other people. And I've been finding that really inspiring. She's trying to draw people closer to God. And in fact, yesterday we went on a Sabbath day away with the group that she's starting with Dan and another couple. Because she's seen something she wants and she thinks that God's in it and she's trying to build it and facilitate it and make it happen and prioritize time for that and money and resources. I see in that it's a heart of seeking God in everything, in wanting to see his kingdom at work in the everyday, but also inviting people into it, making a community where Jesus is the center. And I think maybe sometimes that can sound really Christian, but I think in context, it just means living closely connected to each other and to God, enjoying time together, eating together, enjoying nature, playing games, enjoying life, and inviting other people into that. That is, I think, living well in God's kingdom and keeping Jesus at the center. It doesn't have to just be ultra-Christian all the time. In each of these examples, I see people doing something they love, that they have a heart for and that they have a passion for, but doing it for the sake of other people, not just themselves. Because they have seen or felt a little bit of God's heart for his children, and they have made a decision to step out in faith and with sacrifice to serve, to love, and to help bring down a little bit more of God's kingdom. To help bring down more of his redeeming, his redemption into something, into a place, into a people that are broken. And I find these inspiring. They are heartwarming to a degree. They're amazing. But also I must recognize that these things take sacrifice and they take priority. Seeking someone else's good over our own, stepping out into the kingdom, it is costly. It was costly for Peter. He was crucified upside down. But I think it's all worth it because we get to play a part in God's kingdom. We get to play a part in bringing his love and joy and redemption. So do you know anyone that you're inspired by? Why did they inspire you? And what could you learn from them? Maybe you could even mimic them. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the recent talks of Seven have been about love. Before Christmas, David spoke about remaining in the vine. About 2 months ago, Carl spoke about bringing out that love, living in love, but bringing out that love to share with others. And Owen, a few weeks ago, spoke about mirroring Jesus in living a life of sacrificial love, where we lay down what we love more, so that we can love others more than we love ourselves. Sorry, we can lay down what we want so that we can love others more than ourselves. And last week, Liz was talking about putting Jesus at the center of our lives. These themes of love, generosity, sacrifice, and relationship are core to the kingdom of God. And it was only as I was writing this out that I realized, oh, actually, a lot of this is linking to what I feel like God is trying to say as well, that there is this thread here that I think God has been talking to me about, also wants to talk to us about. And of course that makes sense because God is involved in our lives and he's involved in our church. And so this question, who do you say I am? It is an invitation. It's an invitation to go deeper with God. Just as Jesus went deeper with the disciples once he knew that they understood they'd got a bit of who he was. It's an invitation to identify who God is in your life and to have him identify who you are. And to allow ourselves in and through that relationship with God to be transformed. And I think it's from that place that we can better live and work and just be. So who do you say Jesus is? And where do you want to walk alongside the creator of the world, to do your part in the redemption of this world, and to love what he loves? I'd like to leave a bit of time, space, where we can think about this. Where we can maybe ask that question ourselves, who do I think Jesus is? Who do I think he's saying I am? If you feel like you've got that covered, great. Then maybe think about, where can I be stepping out a little bit? Like I said, it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be leading a church like Peter. It can just be thinking, what do I love? How does that align with God's kingdom? And where can I step out into it in an evening, in a morning? It could be for one person or a community. It could just be for the person you see at church who you don't recognize, who you think's new. You could chat to them. It could be for a colleague at work, a mum in a group, a toddler group that you think's struggling. So I'm going to leave a few minutes of space for that. And then I'm going to close with a prayer, and then we'll have the kids come down. Father, we confess once again our faith and trust in Jesus, believing with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength that he is the Savior of the world, the Son of the living God, who offers us peace that surpasses understanding, who is eager to hear our every prayer, and who assures us that he will be with us always, even to the end of the age. May we be drawn closer to you and to your love. May we be changed by it and want to see others changed by it. Father, do not leave us the same. Change us and transform us, that we may be able to bring more of your kingdom into our places and our families. Amen.